All right, everybody, we're starting with our next talk. Mr. Sebastian Banescu, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. I know it's afternoon after lunch, so really appreciative of everyone who joined this talk. I'm going to talk about start off with like a very brief intro into blockchains and staking, and then dive into the risks and some incidents. So, like, since you're at this conference, I assume that everyone knows, like what a node on the blockchain is. But in case you don't, these nodes are basically meant to execute and validate transactions, right? And in order to incentivize the participants to behave properly, they need to stake some collateral, because if they misbehave on several chains, like Ethereum, they will get slashed, right? And nowadays, proof of stake is the most popular, I guess, consensus, type of consensus. Of course, like, some people still love proof of work, and that's fine. But most modern blockchains that enable smart contracts, programmability, will be running proof of stake or some kind of like variant of that. And in this context, the validators are also called nodes, and they have different names. And they get rewarded if they act properly, right? This film doesn't work anymore. Let's see. No, this I think the battery might be dead. Oh, no? Okay. Okay. So I just wanted to, like, show a brief overview. I think the previous talk also showed, some stats regarding Ethereum staking. I'm not sure if you showed this particular stat, but, like, it's been growing. Like, the blue line is the amount of ETH that is staked, and, like I guess a week ago, in total you have 34 million. And I guess somewhere here is the Chapella fork. And you also mentioned there were, like, I don't know, more than 10 million ETH staked after Chapella or something, I don't know. And then, of course, the black line is the price of ETH, but that's not the relevant line. And this one on Solana, it's also a significant amount now. It's like over 50 billion. And the big difference is that on Solana, way more of the total amount of Solana is staked, right? And I guess, like, this is where, like, many people would also like to see ETH headed, Ethereum, at these levels of stake, right? Like, I think, like, on Solana, there's like more than 60% of Sol staked, right? But who does all this staking, and who's running the actual infrastructure, right? Like, because, like, it's not just software. When it comes to node operators, you have, like, this guy with the wrench in the data centers, right? And they need to be a very mature entity in comparison to what you see maybe in the DeFi space. Node operators need to conform to certain rules. They might need to be certified according to some IT standards, and because they're basically the ones sort of custodying, not really custodying, but they're holding the assets of the stakers to some extent, right? Like, or like, they're holding the keys that could get access to those assets on the staking contract. And they ensure network integrity, and they have several responsibilities and roles, right? They need to make sure that their nodes are up, right? They have a high uptime. They need to handle private keys securely, right? This is one thing which is like the holy grail of attackers, right? And I remember, the CTO of Mobile talking about this. The biggest fear that he has is that North Korean hackers are basically collecting keys from different node operators that don't have good security practices. And at some point, when they gather enough keys, they're going to launch this sort of nuclear attack, which is going to, like, wipe out the entire chain, right? And they also need to handle updates, right? There's always updates of the client, there's always something on the network happening, so they're busy folks, and they definitely contribute, to the entire ecosystem. Like, I feel like they're the unsung heroes of the ecosystem, right? Because they provide the power for compute, the storage, and they ensure decentralization and security. Now, they also are exposed to many risks, right? And these are very different risks from what you see in smart contracts, right? Where in the case of smart contracts, the code could have a vulnerability and it could get hacked and funds could be stolen from the smart contract. In the case of node operators, they have different, types of risks. One was mentioned in the previous talk was like slashing risks, right? And in this case, what would need to happen is that maybe you have like some kind of fancy failover system. When one of your nodes goes offline, you have like some kind of other node that comes online. If it happens that this system malfunctions, is not properly configured, and both systems are online at the same time, they're going to both sign, like maybe different transactions at the same height and get slashed. And the slashing penalties on Ethereum, for instance, vary from like small penalties of 1 ETH per node to the full 32 ETH in your node. And sometimes if you go offline for a long enough time, or if many nodes go offline, you might get slashed. But like the penalties might be lower. But if you go offline, or like this has happened, you will also lose rewards. That's another risk, because stakers are staking with these node operators in order to be earning rewards. And I don't know, like each node operator is free to write their contracts with their stakers in the way they want. But some of them, they offer contracts where they sort of like guarantee that they're going to be online and they're going to be able to provide the same amount of yield over a year that you would have, like as if the system were always running, right? So like 3-point-something% on ETH. And if they're offline for a long time, they won't be able to do that unless they pay it out of pocket. And then they have security risks. So this is one of the, I think, like biggest risks that is also underestimated in impact, right? It's not so low likelihood, as we will see in one of the next slides. And the impact could be the fact that some unauthorized entities compromises and steals the keys. There's different types of keys, right? There's like validator keys, but then there's also staking keys, and it depends how those keys are being managed on the nodes. If they're improperly managed, it could lead to like a total loss. And last but not least, if anything goes wrong with the node operators, they have the reputational risk. And if your reputation is damaged in this space, then people will probably not want to stay with you anymore. But exceptions exist. So let's look at some real world failures that happened over the years. Here's just a timeline that I got from, I forgot to put the source here, but this is from the Rated Network website, so rated.network. And they have this very nice dashboard that shows you a lot of different things. One of the things that they show you is the slashings over time. And here you see a timeline from 2020 to now, I guess last month. The amount that was slashed is shown on the vertical bars. And the biggest amount, which is highlighted there with this box, is 106 ETH. So on the 23rd of November, or actually no, this was the 1st of November last year, there was a node operator who got slashed for 100 ETH around. And I remember that day very, very well. Is anyone from that node operator in this room? I remember that day very well because we were talking to the head of staking of that node operator for probably a year at that point about doing something which we called an infrastructure audit. And basically during that infrastructure audit, we would look at which prevention mechanisms you know, a node operator has to prevent slashing. And if they had sufficiently good things in place, we would offer them insurance against slashing. And we were talking to them for almost a year about that. And they kept saying, like, we're interested, but you know, we're going to do it next month, right? And we talked about this with them right the day before this happened, right? And this incident definitely accelerated discussions, right? You know, people, you know, that was the biggest event that had happened in the space since its inception. And it has happened before, or even before, even after, right? Now let's look at those examples, and you know, like, I'm giving away the name here, but this is what happened, right? On, I mean, the date of the article that was published was on the 14th of November. The actual date of the incident, you know, was I think like was different. I mean, at least. Oh, this I don't know why this is showing this date then. Maybe it was like the 14th. Yeah, and it's unclear why this happened, but you know what is clear, what you can see on the public blockchain scanners, is that the incident started, you know, like probably 5 or more than 5 hours up to the point where it was stopped, where the validators were just turned off, right? And this basically indicates, we don't know for sure, I'm just speculating here, that there was either no monitoring mechanism on these nodes to see, you know, when something is going wrong, or there was a monitoring mechanism but no one was looking at it. You know, like there was no one really, like there was no action put into place when there was an alarm, right? If there were an automated action to say, hey, if this happens, if I get slashed for a bit, you know, like, or like, if, I don't know, I think like there were no attestations. I think it was offline for a long enough time to get slashed, right? And if that happened, the node should have just been taken and restarted and so on. And basically, yeah, it didn't happen. Now, another example is the Instones example, where a security researcher found, you know, like traditional vulnerabilities in the software being run on these nodes, right? And this basically could have led to a direct loss equivalent to $1 billion at that time. So these researchers, you should read this post. These researchers basically went through the clients that these nodes were running. They found vulnerabilities that allowed them to do remote code execution, and then continued trying to do like lateral, you know, like privilege escalation, or you know, like they basically tried to hop from one server to the other, knowing that there were multiple clients running on the same hardware, or on the same machine, right? Now, regarding standards, you know, there's these traditional standards like SOC2 and ISO27001. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but these are traditional IT standards that have been there for many years. And the thing is that many node operators are certified against these. But even if they have no slashing prevention, like I have here in the question below, they can still get certified. So that basically means they're not enough, right? That's why there were, like last year, and this year, 2 standards that came into play. One was Lido, which is not really officially a standard. It's more like a knowledge base or a framework that was sponsored by Lido. I was part of the core team there, and you know, like we were super happy that someone finally sponsored this in November, because we were working on it for some time. And we were working together with Lido, Kill, Blockscope, Bitcoin Suisse, and others. And we developed the risk framework, we developed controls and mitigations, and a communication toolkit in case of an incident, a slashing incident. And here's an excerpt of the risk framework. So it's very simple. It's just a Git book. You can access it online at this URL. And you'll see something like this. You know, they have some ID, some groups like infrastructures and others. Oh, you want to take a picture here? And they have some description, right? Like what's the risk vector and what's, like in detail the vector description. I'm not going to go into it. There's dozens and dozens of these. So like if you're a node operator, you should read it. Another one which is more recent was led by Alluvial, and it started a few months later. It was kicked off in March. And it was done together with PricewaterhouseCoopers, Coinbase, Figment, Blockdaemon, State, Obol, and others, right? There were more players, bigger players in this one, and it was led or like developed by PricewaterhouseCoopers, which enables a certification process. So you can actually get a certificate similar to SOC2 or ISO27001, and it's an official certificate from a certified, like a CPA, certified public accountant. And you can see here it's already looking a bit more professional. It's an Excel sheet, right? And it has like more things like control objective and illustrative testing procedures and documents for testing procedures. So it's more involved. I think like we did a comparison. We've done audits, infrastructure audits for one standard and for the other. For this standard, the lift is probably like 3 times more. It's 3 times more difficult to do this kind of certification than the Lido one. There were a few differences, right? Like the objective of the first one is mainly to help Lido maintain a good set of validators that don't keep getting slashed like last year. For NORS, the objective is to offer a path to certification. To offer basically like something that hasn't existed in the space. And like one is basically developed by a smaller group of crypto native companies, and the other one is developed by a larger and more professional group, including insurance companies. And yeah, I guess like both of them are designed for Ethereum, but they have slightly different goals. So in conclusion, based on all of what I said here, just keep in mind that on all of the proof-of-stake blockchains, there are probably more than 440 billion staked. And on some chains, these validators may get slashed. So what you stake, you could lose. Traditional IT certifications are good, but they're not sufficient. So make sure that whoever you're staking with has some kind of infrastructure audit, or even better, a NORS certificate. That's it. Thanks a lot.
All right, so I think we have enough time for 2 questions, actually. Yes. So, does anybody have any questions?
Which is worse, getting slashed or getting slashed from the majority of your validators, or having a key security incident for the majority? Like you mentioned, if stones. Do you think that's even worse for the business than the Bitcoin space?
Yeah, I think that's way, way worse. Like, that's sort of been my nightmare in the sense that even before I heard, Ocean from Obol say it, I was always thinking, like, what is preventing, like, traditional hackers from finding a remote code execution exploit and all of the nodes running a blockchain and just absolutely taking control of that blockchain and just forget about everything which is on it. Like, they can shut it down, they can steal everything, they can just take control over it, right? So I think that is really like my worst nightmare. Yeah. Any other questions?
I actually had a question with the NORS certificate that you said.
Mm-hmm.
Is it only for like POS blockchains, or it could work on every kind of blockchain, like POW or different kind of blockchain that we have?
I think, that's a very good question, because like I was just, like the NORS right now is only for Ethereum. But I was just talking to, like someone who's a Solana validator, and they told me, well, I mean, other than the web signer, like the Web3 signer or whatever signer you're using, that standard could be applicable for Solana or others, right? Like, I think the big difference, like there's like small differences, but other than that, the standard could be applicable to others. Maybe not all of the things in the standard. So there need to be some revisions which say like, oh, this subset is relevant for proof of work or for whatever blockchain. Yeah.
Perfect. Any final questions?
Tuck and North are kind of information security frameworks. Is there also the idea to plan this kind of penetration standard focused on collaborators where you have these kind of tools like Linux, Mesos, how to use them that you can really run as an operator yourself or by someone that is
Can you take a picture?
Also, yeah.
To prove that
That's Face ID.
Oh, no, but you can take the picture.
I can take care of that.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
I don't know how to. Sorry for taking time here, but definitely I think like that particular question is very relevant, exactly in the context of the previous question with like, what's the worst that can happen. And I think the traditional security angle is underestimated by many projects that only consider, like we just need a smart contract audit and we're good. Like I think everyone is saying it, Web3 is actually Web 2.5 because there's so much traditional infrastructure in there that has traditional bugs and vulnerabilities. So I think like that kind of stuff is being done by some companies already, but it's not in
Those standards that define an experience.
I mean, in this standard, there's already something in that direction, but it doesn't say what tools you should use. But there, it talks about closing ports and so on. Like these standards already contain that. Yeah.
Perfect. So I think that's our time, but thank you so much.
Thank you.